Hello, welcome to section 1.2. In this video, or in this section, we are going to be learning the different types of fractions, how to convert between a couple of these fractions, and as well as how to simplify fractions. So recall, a fraction is an expression in the form of a over b, where a is the numerator, or in other words, the numerator is the top part of the fraction, and b is the denominator, or in other words, the denominator refers to the bottom part of the fraction, where a is being divided by b. Now, looking at the different types of fractions that we're going to see, we have a proper fraction, which that is where the numerator, the top part of the fraction, is less than the denominator. So an example of a proper fraction would be 1/2. Because 1 is in our numerator and 1 is less than 2. Now, inversely, or on the opposite side, we have improper fractions, and that's where our numerator is greater than or equal to the denominator. So if we flip this fraction 1/2 and we make it 2 over 1, that is now an improper fraction. Also note here that our numerator, if it's equal to the denominator, it is also technically classified as an improper fraction. So an example of that, when the numerator and denominator are equal, we could have 2 over 2, which, if you're thinking, doesn't that just equal 1? It does. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So just to keep note of that. And then a mixed number is a number that's written as that is written as the sum of a whole number and a proper fraction. So let's break that down. So first off, the word sum, that means addition. And a whole number can be any number like 1, 2, 3, and so on. And a proper fraction. Now up here, recall, a proper fraction is when the numerator is less than the denominator. So an example of a mixed number could be 3 2/3. That's an example of a mixed number, and we see mixed numbers actually all the time, especially when we're cooking and you look at the box and you're like, how many cups do I need? And it'll say, oh, you need 1/2 cups. That's a mixed number. Alrighty. And now looking, if you need a refresher on rounding to places, you can refer to here. And one thing to note, at this point in math and higher, when you're asked to round to the tenths place, hundredths or thousandths place, and so on, typically we're referring to the decimal place. So, like, for example, in these problems, you're going to be asked to round to the nearest hundredth place. So we're going to be asked to round to the nearest decimal place if possible. Now, sometimes you might not be able to. But if you get to the point where you have a decimal, we will round to the nearest hundredths place. Alrighty, so let's get into example 1. For each of the following problems, we're going to have to, number 1, sketch a pie chart so we can visually see what the value is. And then you can either use a calculator or just by visually looking, you can just guess the value. And then we're going to round to the nearest hundredths place as needed. And then we're going to have to classify whether or not the fractions we are dealing with here are proper, improper, or a mixed number for each example. Alrighty. So for the first example, we have 3/2. Now when sketching pie charts, think of it like this. So 2 is less than 3, right? So we know that we're going to have a value greater than 1 in this case. So we know that this pie chart here is going to be fully shaded in because we have a value of 1. And then we're going to have to add, well, let's see. So if we have the value of 1, that's equivalent to 2 over 2. But we still have 1/2 left over. So we're going to need to sketch out a pie that's 1/2. So we're going to need to shade in half that pie. So what does this equal? We don't necessarily need a calculator for this, right? Because we know 2 over 2, 2 divided by 2 is just 1, plus 1/2, well, that's just 0.5, right? So our answer is just going to be 1.5. Now, our last part is to classify this kind of fraction. So I encourage you to pause the video and try to classify what kind of fraction is 3/2. And assuming you have given it a go, this fraction is an improper fraction. And that is because the numerator is greater than the denominator. I don't know why I circled that because all the work we did is the answer to this question. Okay. So looking at example 2, I encourage you to pause the video and actually fully try this one on your own. Now, assuming you have worked through it, let's go through it together. So 8 is greater than 5. So we're not going to have a value of 1 or greater. This is just going to be a decimal. We know it's going to be 0 point something, something, something. So in that case, we're only going to have 1 pi. Let me draw that a little bit larger. But because this is over 8, we're going to have 8 parts to the pi. So I'm going to draw 8 parts, or 8 slices. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is really, there we go. And 7, 8. Okay, so now we have 8 slices, and we need to shade in 5. So I'm going to shade in the first half, which is 4, and then 1 more, which is 5. Now, using a calculator, this equals 0.625. But looking at the directions, we need to round to the nearest hundredth as needed, and we have a third decimal place, which is to the thousandths place. So we need to round our answer to the nearest hundredth place, which is that second decimal place here. And because we have a 5 after 2, that means we're going to round up. So our final answer is going to be approximately 0.63. And that's our approximate value if we round to the nearest hundredths place. And last but not least, we're dealing with a proper fraction here. And looking at example number 3, we have 2 1/2, or we have 2 1/2. So because this 2 is here, and recall, a mixed number is the sum of a whole number and a proper fraction. And we know sum means to add. So what this means is we have a whole pi, 1, plus another whole pi, 2, and then we have plus this proper fraction, which is 1/2. So we have plus a half. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Plus a half, that's 2.5. And then this fraction that we're dealing with here is a mixed number. There you go. Alrighty. So now let's take a look into how to convert a mixed number. So it's a fraction or a number like this. How to convert it into an improper fraction, to a fraction like this. Because once we get into how to add and subtract fractions, multiply and divide them, you're going to need to be able to convert a mixed number into an improper fraction, so that way you can add or subtract them or multiply and divide them. So this is important to know how to do for the future sections of this unit. So let's say we have some whole number a in the fraction b over c. If we want to convert this into an improper fraction, we take the denominator c and we multiply it to a. And we take whatever a times c is and add that to b. So what this ends up being is c times a plus b over the denominator, which is c. So let's look at a couple examples. So first example, we have 1 1/2. So to convert that into a mixed number, or to convert that into an improper fraction, we're going to do 2 times 1 and then add 1 to that. So 2 times 1 plus 1. We're going to put all that over 2. 2 times 1, well, that's 2. plus 1 over 2. 2 plus 1, well, that's 3 over 2. So our final answer is 3/2. Now looking at example number 2, I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own. And now let's work through it together. So we're going to have to multiply 4 and 3, and then add 3. So we're going to get 4 times 3 plus 3 over 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. So our final answer is 15/4. And that's your final answer. Now, let's go the opposite way. Let's say we're given an improper fraction like this, and we want to convert this into this. Let's take a look at how to do that. So recall, an improper fraction is when the numerator is greater than the denominator. So that means that the value is going to be 1 or greater, which is why we can convert this into this. Because a value is greater than 1, we can convert it into something like this, so it's visually easier to see what the value is. Because looking at 15/4, it's a little bit harder to see what the value is mentally in our heads, but 3 3/4 is a lot easier to be able to visually or mentally see what that value would be. So that's why it's important to be able to know how to go from 15/4 to 3 3/4. So how to do that is we take whatever values in our numerator a, and we divide it by b. Now we have to ask ourselves, how many groups of b, or how many times can we multiply b until we get to a? Now, a lot of times, you're not going to get a full number. You're going to get a decimal. So how many times can we multiply b before we go past a is the question you want to ask yourself. So you're going to get some whole number, and then you're going to get a remainder. With remainder, and your remainder, let's say the remainder is r, your fraction will look like this. So you have your whole number next to it, and then you're going to have your remainder over b, your original denominator. Now, this is confusing. Let's work through some examples, and it should clear it up for you. Okay, looking at our first example, we have 3/2. So to do this, we're going to have to ask ourselves, how many times does 2 go into 3? Well, 2 only goes into 3 once. So we're going to have 1, but the thing is we still have 1 left over because 2 is 1 less than 3. So we're going to have a remainder of 1. So what that looks like as a mixed number is we're going to have 1, and then our remainder is 1, so we're going to do 1 over 2. And that's your mixed number, 1, 1/2. Now I encourage you to pause the video and try example number 2 on your own. And assuming you have given it a go, let's work through it. So we have to ask ourselves the question, how many times does 4 go into 15? Well, let's see, we have 4, 8, 12, 16. Oh, 16 is larger than 15, so we can only go up to 12. And that is 4, 8, 12. So that means we're going to have a whole number of 3. But our remainder is going to be 3, because 15 minus 12 is 3. So our mixed number is going to look like this, 3 3/4. Alright, so for example 4, we're going to start to look into how to simplify fractions. Now, in simplifying fractions, you have to ask yourself the question, can I divide both the numerator and denominator by a common value? And if you can't, then the fraction's fully simplified. There's nothing else that you can do. But if there's a common value that you can divide both the numerator and denominator by, then the fraction is not simplified and you need to simplify it more. So taking a look at example 1, we have 4 over 12. Now both these numbers are even, so we automatically know we can divide by 2. However, You can also take note that 12 divided by 4 gets you 3. So since that's a whole number, you can divide both the numerator and denominator by 4 right away. So then you only had to simplify this fraction once rather than twice. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 1/3, you can't simplify that anymore, so that is your final answer. Looking at example number 2, I encourage you to pause the video and try to simplify this fraction fully on your own. And assuming you have tried this one on your own, let's work through it. So with this problem, because 18 and 24 are both even, that automatically means we can both divide them by 2. However, you can also take note that both of these both 18 and 24 can be divided by 6. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 18 divided by 6 is 3, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So our final answer is 3/4. Looking at example number 3, we have 24 over 44. So both of these numbers are divisible by 2, but they're also divisible by 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. 24 divided by 4 is 6, and then 44 divided by 4 is 11. That's your final answer. Now taking a look at example number 4, I encourage you to pause the video and try this one on your own, and now let's work through it together. So 63 and 36 are not both even. 36 is, but 63 is odd. So we can't divide by 2 or 4. So those are kind of out. So what we can do, though, is see if both of these numbers are divisible by 3. And it just so happens that they are divisible by 3. So 63 divided by 3, well, that's 21. And 36 divided by 3 is 12. And can we simplify this anymore? The answer is yes, we can. Both 21 and 12 are divisible by 3. So we're going to simplify this again, and we get 7 over 4, 7/4. And we can't simplify that anymore or reduce that fraction, 7/4, so that's our final answer.